2012. Can you believe it's been 11 years since Cyberpunk was announced, it released, we had that debacle of a launch, and now we're in a place where CD Projekt Red seem to be proud of the game they've finally delivered into players' hands. They've walked away, they're going to eventually make a sequel, but what we've got now, that is the complete Cyberpunk experience. The question is, are players happy? Did CD Projekt Red redeem themselves? Today I want to go through my thoughts on the game, because I have played Cyberpunk twice now. I played it when it came out, I did pretty much all of the content, and I've played it again very recently, post the launch of 2.0 and Phantom Liberty. I've 100%ed, I think, the entire game, and I think I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen it at its absolute worst, the launch, and I've seen it now, where it seems quite complete, and judging both sides, seeing what players think, I really want to delve into how it is as a complete experience. I guess to start off with, before I get into how the game is, how 2.0 sort of holds up, I do want to make this a little bit more than a review, and I want to talk initially about the launch of the game. What I think really happened is there were a couple of factions of players. There were more casual gamers who were marketed to by CD Projekt Red as if Cyberpunk was going to be the next GTA. It was going to be your surrogate life. You could do anything you wanted in Night City. You could go bowling with your friends. You could go dancing. You could get a job. It was going to replace real life. Don't worry about your problems. Night City is going to be where it's at. You'll be in Cyberpunk. That's all that is going to matter for your day-to-day from now on. And then there were people who were just looking for a role-playing game. They were looking for the next title from the developer of Witcher 3. That's all they were really expecting. What I saw with Cyberpunk is many people think the marketing and the entire release debacle was a big scam, that it was CD Projekt Red being completely greedy. They were out to rip everyone off, and they ripped that band-aid off. They pretended to be beloved, our friends, our family, the shining light in the game industry, and they betrayed us all with the release of Cyberpunk. Some of that may be true, they absolutely dropped the ball, but what I really think is they were just incompetent. And that was very much the case with the marketing team. I've seen this at a lot of businesses, it happens in games, it happens in other spaces, is that the marketing team does not actually understand the product that they are meant to be pushing out there and advertising to us. It happens with other games, not just Cyberpunk. Look at Bethesda and look how they marketed Dishonored, Prey, Deathloop. They treated them like action games almost. And it's the same with Cyberpunk. The marketing was done to make it look almost like a GTA-like. They even updated their website at one point, removed role-playing game, replaced it with, I think, action-adventure. And so there were casual gamers expecting something like Grand Theft Auto, which it never was. The developers never went in that direction. They were just trying to make the successor to Witcher 3. And I think they did a pretty decent job with that. If you forget all the marketing, if we had have just loaded up Cyberpunk day one, if we forget the absolute mess, the lack of polish, the bugs, all of that stuff, if you try and block it out, then Cyberpunk is somewhat a successor to Witcher 3. It's got the same sort of gameplay, the same sort of open world. It's just got more bells and whistles, given it's a futuristic setting. You've got guns, you're not just using your swords, your knives, and your poisons. So I think from that perspective, CD Projekt Red didn't portray us that much. The issue was rushing the game out in the state that it was in. And if we look at that objectively, I really do think that the bane, the real crux of the problem was that they released on Xbox One and PS4. I think when the game released, people on PC like myself, we booted it up, and it was alright. It wasn't Game of the Year. It definitely had a lot of problems. I mentioned the bugs. It has pop-in. You even had, if you looked in the distance and you looked at a car or a character, it was almost like Super Mario Brothers on the NES. They were 2D little figurines if you looked in the distance. So it was absolutely not ready on any device, but it was just so bad on PS4 and Xbox One that it was genuinely a scam. That's probably what destroyed them. So many games released these days unfinished, but they just got it so wrong on those earlier consoles that it killed the reputation of the game, of the studio as well, and they had so much work to do to try and win people back. But the state of the launch, I think it's got to be put into perspective, that the overall game was there, especially on PC. It was just lacking the polish. And I do say that because with 2.0 and the new release, the expansion, I've seen a lot of posts, comments on the internet suggesting that they've like totally changed the game and there's all this new content in it. It's amazing now. Come on, all that stuff was there when the game came out. The quest lines, the facial animations. I'm talking about Panam. Everyone seems to use Panam now as a surrogate girlfriend or something, and people seem to think the way she looks at you, the relationship, how it all plays out, that was all there from the start. This isn't new. It was all there in 2020, and it's just that they've improved things here and there and added some new little systems, quality of life features, and so on. But I do want to say that 2.0 is not a drastic difference. It's really just polishing up what was there in the original release. Now again, I've played this game twice, so when it came out in 2020, I enjoyed it. It actually exceeded my expectations because I thought it was just going to be a bit of an action-y type game in the Night City setting, maybe take some influence from Witcher 3, but mostly be an action-adventure. Not really the case. It was a genuine RPG. Your character was a little bit predefined. I don't think V is someone you can absolutely roleplay as. It's not as if you can be a strict corpo, I'm going to be a yes man, and then you can be a rebel as a nomad. It's not really that. Regardless of the origin story you choose, you're essentially the same kind of character. There's just a handful of different dialogue choices, which are mostly fluff, at least from what I played. It doesn't seem like it affects the gameplay or choices massively, depending on your origin. The story itself is solid. I don't think it's as good as Witcher 3, but one of the reasons for that is a rumor, I reckon, that's gone around for a long time, suggesting that the Cyberpunk narrative was changed to accommodate Keanu Reeves. Obviously, he was part of the marketing hype, and everyone was so interested. Everyone went into overdrive of excitement over Keanu that CD Projekt Red changed the story to make sure he was a big focus. If you think about the start of the game, you're going on adventures with Jackie, or you sort of are, it's really just a whole bunch of cutscenes that get thrown at you. Then you're going on a big mission, Jackie's dead, you say goodbye, and you're very, very sad. It seems like that portion was rushed. Many believe that Act 1 was actually meant to be you and Jackie doing gigs almost, doing missions, learning about each other, bonding, becoming great mates, and then when you do your grand heist at Arasaka Tower, that it would be a much more emotional blow. But what seems to have happened is they rushed all of that to get us to Keanu, because they were a bit worried if we spent half the game with Jackie, then suddenly you've got a voice in your head of Keanu Reeves that some people might have switched off by the time they get to that point, and then there wouldn't have been as much excitement around Keanu, around Johnny Silverhand, if you reached him late in the game. Some people may just switched off before reaching that point. A lot of games, barely anyone finishes them, so it could have been a genuine fear from CD Projekt, and perhaps they did muddle up their story late in the piece to accommodate. That'd be a little bit sad. I don't think the story's bad at all, though. It is intriguing. The whole idea of you've got this relic in your head that's killing you, you've got to find a cure, and now you're going to be going on this journey. It's about the adventure. It's the friends you make along the way, like Panam, Kerry, River, and so on. It adds a bit of depth. I do like the main story, and the side quests themselves are all pretty good. They are a little bit of a pain to replay at times. I mentioned I've played the game through twice now. I couldn't remember everything on my second play. It was 3 years or so later. But you do get a lot of quests that just drag on, like spending time with Kerry's family, his nephews, I believe it is. You just want to sort of shoot yourself in the head. You can't believe that V still wants to live. It gets a bit old. So they are a little bit of a drag at times, but overall the quests are pretty fun to replay, especially when it's focused on the gameplay. The gigs are really good to go through because that's where you're using your tools. The gig is often, here's a phone call, here's a text, now clear out this compound and do it your own way. You can use your gadgets, you can stealth your way in, you can go in guns blazing. The gameplay itself offers a lot of variety. And I did mention earlier, The Witcher 3 didn't really have that. The gameplay in that game, it's honestly bland a lot of the time. You use your Witcher senses to solve a case exactly the same way you solved the last dozen. You kill something, that's often about it. But in Cyberpunk, they have upgraded that. There is a lot more that you can do. Again, that was there from launch. It's always been there. It's always been a positive. I just think a lot of people didn't talk about it so much because of the disastrous launch and the lack of polish and technical issues, but the gameplay itself was quite solid. I may have given the title a bit of a disservice because I played on normal difficulty, I believe, and honestly, over time it just made things way too easy. When I'm playing in stealth mode, I literally didn't even need to hide or sort of distract enemies. I could literally just crouch, and you can use sprint while you're crouching, I believe, with a skill, and you could just beeline to an objective, walking in front of NPCs, enemies, guards, and even if they spotted you, they wouldn't trigger, you wouldn't sort of be close enough for a long enough period of time for them to actually attack you or really spot you. So that just made it quite trivial from a stealth perspective. Even if I went in guns blazing, that wasn't much better because I could just one-shot pretty much every enemy with my sniper. So that may have been my bad. I should have turned the difficulty up. But I've been let down by a lot of games where you do go into hard or very hard mode, hardcore, and often it's lazy, where the enemies just have more health, you take more damage, but there's nothing really interesting. Perhaps if I played on a harder mode, it would have forced me to use my skills a bit more, think about my build to a higher degree, but it was still fun. I've enjoyed going through the areas because the level design has been quite interesting. Again, compared to Witcher 3, they've had to design buildings. It's had that Deus Ex-like experience when it comes to the gameplay. There's pros and cons there though, because the skills themselves, they are cool. It's nice to be able to pick whether I want to focus on strength or more technology, those different types of skills. The issue is though, is if I go to do a gig and it relies on me breaking into a building, for instance, and there's hundreds of gigs it feels like where that is the case, the problem is every building almost feels like it has the same set of rules. I can knock the door down if I'm spec'd in strength. I can do the same by hacking my way through the entrance, as well as use the assortment of other skills that you can spec into. But what I mean by the same rules apply is that every building is the same. There's always some sort of solution that uses those 5 or 6 skills that'll allow you to get in. Sure, it varies slightly, but it feels very similar. If you've played the game, you'll understand what I mean there. And it just makes it a little bit predictable. When I was younger, I used to think that was a good thing, that every single building or every level allowed you to approach it using your skills, and there'd always be a vent that you could crawl through. It was just there and available so I could stealth my way in. Same with hacking my way through the entrance and so on. But it ends up feeling very gamey. The world doesn't feel real anymore. And if you go back and play the original Deus Ex, it wasn't actually like that. It was a bit more realistic, where you would occasionally run into a problem where one of your skills that you were spec'd into would be the solution. For instance, you might have 2 options. If you're spec'd into strength, there would be a metal bar you could remove, and that would act as a shortcut into the building. But if you weren't spec'd into strength, you would have no choice but to have to fight the guards at the entrance. In that particular situation, there was not just a convenient vent somewhere that I could crawl into, or I could just hack my way into a computer and it would open a door, I could bypass the combat. There was only 2 solutions. But once I get into the building, I might run into a brand new problem. And this time, there might be a solution to stealth my way in, but there wasn't a metal bar I could just remove. I couldn't just knock down a door with my strength. The short of it is, I think the situations should be less predictable. Sometimes allow my skills to do the work. Other times, tell me instead, you are not spec'd into a relevant skill in this situation. Unfortunately, you are going to have to fight your way in if you want to do this quest. It may not sound good on paper, but I can just tell you now it would make the game feel less predictable, because the gigs start to get really repetitive because you're just approaching them all the same way. Your skills, it doesn't really matter what you're spec'd into. It's easy to max most of them out pretty much anyway. You're always just going to click F. If you're playing on computer, hold F to open the door or do what you need to do with the computer. And so there's not much thinking involved. I'd like to see less predictability in a sequel. The open world, so it was quite good when the game came out. There was obviously just the bugs, the lack of polish. It made it a little bit more hectic. But under 2.0, it's very smooth. If you compare it to another recent release, Starfield, it's head and shoulders above. It is a genuine 2023 standard title on the open world front. And in terms of exploring it, purely looking at the art, what's going on visually, that's really nice. It's not just you've got aimless people wandering around. You will see, for instance, cops who've put up a ring around a dead body. There'll be random shootouts going on. It's very difficult to wander and not find something. I guess the problem is, like most open world games, they do start to feel quite samey. This title, it is better than your average Assassin's Creed Far Cry when it comes to the open world. It's not that level of copy and paste, but it's not miles better either. The quest delivery, I do think it's always been a problem, where you just open the map and you've got the dots on the map. And this was the case in Witcher 3 as well. It was just all of these question marks, and they were basically telling you where the content was, and you could just avoid everything else. I've always said this, that when you put map markers on a map, it's actually telling you where the content isn't, because you're basically saying, here's the points of interest, everything else in our city or our open world is pointless. There's no reason to go anywhere outside of these question marks unless you want to just take in your surroundings. Again, the gigs and the quests themselves are pretty good, but you don't really have to look for them. You're just going around your map, and I do think that's where it's a missed opportunity. I would much rather they give you a reason just to wander around, and by going into a dark alley or going into a building that's open, you just run into these quests and gigs. They almost come as a surprise. It just felt like your phone did all of the work for you on the exploration front. You'd be driving around, you get a call, hey, here's a job, and you get a text message, this will give you all the context. That was about it. The exploration, a little bit lacking. I'd like to see that improved if they continue the franchise into the future. I did honestly fast travel around for that reason. It would have been nice to drive around, get on that motorbike, do a little bit of a whirl, see what's going on. But the issue is it just feels a little bit pointless. Again, I can take in the scenery, but that gets old after a while. You just want to get to the content. And because of the delivery, because it is all map markers, that's what you start to do. And hey, they do put all those fast travel points across the map for that purpose. They know you're going to utilize them. That brings me to something that was added in 2.0. So again, not a drastically different game. It is more that polish. It's tightening things up. But a huge thing was that they introduced the police system. That comes back to what I mentioned at the start, where there are a lot of gamers expecting a GTA-like. And when the game released, they were very disappointed that police would just sort of teleport behind you and then disappear after the crime has gotten a bit boring for them. As part of 2.0, they have added a wanted system like the Grand Theft Auto titles. It sounded really good. People were just saying positive things about it. But I'm going to say this, it may be controversial. I don't like the police system. I find it annoying. I don't think it really makes sense in a role-playing game. The reason is as I mentioned that I was just fast traveling around the map. And one of the reasons for that is because of this wanted system. If you're just wanting to drive to the next quest, the next gig, and you accidentally run someone over, or they just wander into your vehicle, that happens very often, then you'll suddenly get a star, the police will be chasing you, and then you have to hide away for a couple of minutes, wait for the star to disappear so you can go and start your quest. And you can sort of say, oh, but that's immersive, you shouldn't be running people over. But it is, at the end of the day, just a video game. I'm not really running people down, running into a building, shooting everyone down. I think I saw a controversy recently where people were saying, you shouldn't be shooting people in games, are you a psychopath? Hey, it is just pixels, I can play how I want. But the point is, I just want to get to my quest objective and be let alone. I don't want some annoying system that they've added to delay me. There's already enough sort of busy work getting to the next objective. I don't want to be slowed down even further. I feel like the police system was answering feedback from people who weren't necessarily looking at the game objectively. I agree that they should make police more immersive, more part of the experience, not just teleporting around, but I don't think the solution they came up with was the right one. It's what players were saying, but I don't think players really understood the issue, and they shouldn't have just copied from GTA, because I've never had a positive experience with the wanted system. I don't even think it was implemented very well, because if you're doing a quest like the racing quest, I believe there's 4 different races with Claire, one of the characters, often you'll just pick up a wanted star because Claire shoots someone, or one of the vehicles smashes into one of your competitors in the race, and then you end up running someone over, and then suddenly the police are chasing after you in what's meant to be an on-rails quest. A little bit of a lazy implementation. It seems like people praised it without really testing it out in action. I don't think that's very good, and that's one of the major updates of 2.0. Not really new quests outside of Phantom Liberty, the paid expansion, and yet it was getting absolutely praised. So I don't think that's a win for CD Projekt Red. That was a mixed bag. To sum it up, I think Cyberpunk has always been a good game. It's just now that the controversy's not here anymore, that people are seeing it for what it is, and they are praising it. They're not looking for reasons to absolutely shit on it. It was fair to do it at launch. There was scam editions on the PS4 and Xbox One, but the content itself has always been quality to an extent. It is an RPG. It might not be the most hardcore one in the world. It does focus a bit more on celebrity characters like Keanu, Johnny Silverhand, more than the RPG depth than the gameplay and such, but given it's a mainstream product, I think they do a pretty good job. I've played games that are way more dumbed down than this one, so I do respect CD Projekt Red for that. I think the developers, they were coming at this from a good place. It was really just management, the marketing team, who didn't understand what they were doing, what a role-playing game is, that kind of stuffed them around, and it crumbled their reputation. They've done some work to try and fix it, but I don't think they'll ever fully recover. People will always remember. Phantom Liberty, though, I won't go into massive detail. There's plenty of reviews on it, and I wanted this to be about the overall product 11 years later. But I think Phantom Liberty, it's got a good story. It does focus on celebrity characters with Idris Elba, but Reed, his character, is quite good. I actually went into Phantom Liberty without spoiling myself at all, and I kept hearing about Kurt Hansen. He's the villain of the piece. He gets mentioned a lot at the start, and I thought, oh, interesting, Elba's playing a villain, but it turns out, no, he's actually playing an ally called Reed, and you meet him sort of a few hours into the story. It's intriguing. They describe it as a spy thriller, which is fairly accurate. It's got some similarities with Escape from New York, where you're rescuing the president from the start, and then there's a bit more going on. It's not purely an action movie sort of focus. There's a fair bit of intrigue there. Played it through, enjoyed it. There's a lot of choice and consequence. I didn't personally play through all the endings, but I did look them up afterwards, and they sounded quite intriguing. There's even a new ending to the base game, which is pretty interesting, I thought. I'm glad it's not just a fluff ending. It actually adds a whole lot more to it. It's worth checking out, even if you don't want to go through the whole game. It's worth looking up and reading about, because it is pretty cool. And I will say, the side content in Phantom Liberty, it's a step up. The gigs in 2.0, in the base game, they are kind of fetch questy, where the gameplay's fun because you'll go to a compound, use your skills, stealth, blast your way in, have a good time, but the story's just really basic. It is often just someone gives you a call, you do their task, you move on. There's occasionally cool ones where Johnny is front and center. I remember one where you have to rescue one of his bandmates' guitars, and there's some cool story moments with Johnny, but plenty of fetch quests amongst them. However, in Phantom Liberty, most of them have really good choice and consequence. You'll often be presented a story and it seems, oh yeah, this is just a classic. Oh yeah, we've got to take out the bad guy, this will be easy, but then you meet the bad guy and there's more to it than it seems. You've got to make a difficult choice. I always think the mark of a good quest, a good piece of choice and consequence, is where you can't just make the decision, you're mulling over it, and you've got to get out of your chair and you've got to pace around before you actually make the decision. I'm sure you've all been there. That, to me, is when they get it right. When it's a super obvious choice, that's a bit boring. I also like as well where it's not always a right answer, where no matter the option you choose, the outcome has heaps and heaps of depth to it and you think, yeah, I can justify that decision. I actually like it when you make the choice sometimes, and hey, you got fooled, the character scammed you, or you thought you were making a noble choice, but it turns out trying to do the right thing ended up making things way worse. I think it's okay to do that. Some people might say, oh, well, it's just going to get you to save scum, you're going to save, and then you're going to replay the choice and get the better option. I think that can be the case if you lose out on, say, things that push the gameplay forward, like you miss out on getting heaps of XP or skills by making the wrong choice. That can be a little bit annoying, but that being said, this is a single-player game, it's not competitive. I think fun should be what comes first. If a handful of people complain about min-maxing the title, who gives a shit? Like, this is a game I'm playing by myself. If I want to play something online, I'll play an MMORPG, or something of that nature. So again, Phantom Liberty gets it right on the side content front. It's fun, Dogtown the setting. It feels different enough from Night City and kind of pulls me in. I did hear a lot of hype for it before I played it. I know I mentioned I didn't get spoilers. That's probably all I heard, was that Dogtown was really interesting. I don't think it was that good. It's exactly the same gameplay where you're basically just fast traveling around. Anything of interest is a map marker on the map. Except for these relics, you can actually find skill points in the world, and they'll often be tied to a little dungeon kind of encounter. You got to kill some hard enemies. I thought that was a neat touch. There probably could have been more of that in the base game, actually finding skills through exploration, skill points. I like that. I love exploring and upgrading my character outside of just picking up a new weapon that's an upgrade, because when it's all randomly generated loot, not as cool as finding a hand-placed skill point, which is the case in Phantom Liberty. So the expansion, it's a nice add-on. It does complete the package. Overall, I think the complete picture of Cyberpunk is very good. I do think it's a fair follow-up to Witcher 3. Not quite as good on the story front, but the gameplay for me and the variety does make up for it. Now that it's polished, it's good, but I don't want to call the overall experience a success. I don't want to reward developers who release something half-finished. They demand all your money, they demand full price for the game, you hand it over, you try and play it, it's a dud, it doesn't work properly, and they put up an apology note on Twitter, on their website, and say, yeah, sorry, we'll fix it, we promise. Stick with us. I've had enough of that. I don't want to see it continue, and I really hope that because it's happened so much over the last couple of years, pretty much since Cyberpunk, it seems like no one took that as, oh, lesson learned, we better not do that too. Developers actually looked at it and went, oh my god, they got away with that. Let's do it as well. Great, we don't have to finish products. Let's do half, take the money, and then we'll carry on. It's like we're charging money for beta access, but we don't have to say anything. We don't have to admit to it. So that's kind of what's happened. Cyberpunk has almost been at least the mainstream start of that terrible practice. I don't want to forgive them for that. I don't want to say they're doing a good job. Hopefully, though, if their reputation is important to them, they seem to claim that it is, they probably put more work into the post-release of Cyberpunk than they had to. They already made so much money. So maybe they are genuine. Future products are a little bit better, a little bit more polished. But we'll see. I'm not going to pre-order anything that they do make in the future. I'm going to wait. I did that for Phantom Liberty, which is one of the reasons why I've only just finished it all now. I didn't immediately buy it. I wanted just to get a feel for word of mouth, what people were saying, and they seem to do a good job. I've played it now, and they did do a good job. So if they keep doing that, I'll buy their games, but I won't do it day one. They've still got to earn our trust. Overall, a pretty interesting story. What happened with Cyberpunk? It's hard to believe it's gone on so long. 3-4 years ago, I was thinking about the game. It comes out, whirlwind of emotions, and yet in 2023, I'm still playing it to some extent, with some improvements. I feel like I've got my money's worth with the overall Cyberpunk journey, the Cyberpunk experience. So, thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.